The tennis world is buzzing at the moment due to the comments of one of the tennis goats about Jannik Sinner. What happened to Roger Federer this week at the Australian Open is one of the most ridiculous examples of fans getting their wires crossed that I've seen in tennis in a long time. And the crazy part? Federer didn't even say anything controversial. He didn't throw shade. He didn't disrespect anyone. But somehow, Jannik Sinner's fans decided to launch an all-out assault on one of the most respected figures in tennis history over comments that were so benign, so harmless, that the backlash says way more about modern fan culture than it does about anything Federer actually said. Let me set the scene for you because context matters here. Roger Federer is back at the Australian Open for the first time since his retirement. Not to play, obviously, but to participate in the inaugural opening ceremony, to play an exhibition match with Andre Agassi, Patrick Rafter, and Leighton Hewitt. It's a celebration. It's supposed to be fun. The media asks him about the current state of tennis, about the Alcaraz-Sinner rivalry, about these two young champions who are dominating the sport right now. And Federer does what any retired legend does. He gives thoughtful, analytical answers about how he sees the game. The specific question was about Sinner, about how Federer would approach playing against him if they were both in their primes. It's a hypothetical, a thought experiment, the kind of thing tennis fans love to debate in bars and on social media. Who would win between prime Federer and current Sinner? It's a fun question with no real answer, because they never actually played when both were at their peak. But Federer gave an honest response, and that's when all hell broke loose. He said that watching Grigor Dimitrov play Sinner at Wimbledon last year made him think about how a match between himself and the Italian would have unfolded, because Dimitrov plays a style very similar to how Federer played. Attacking tennis, lots of variety, coming forward, taking time away with the forehand. And in that Wimbledon match, Dimitrov was absolutely crushing Sinner, had him down 2-0, was completely dominating until an injury forced the Bulgarian to retire from the match. Federer was sitting in the royal box, watching it all unfold, and as a former player, his brain started working, started analyzing, started thinking about the tactical approach. That's it. That's what Federer said. He mentioned that it was the first time he'd really thought about how he would play against Sinner, because watching Dimitrov gave him a framework, a reference point. He said he tends to put himself in Alcaraz's mindset when watching Carlos play, because their styles are more similar. But watching Sinner against Dimitrov at Wimbledon, he thought, okay, now I understand how I would probably play against Jannik. That's the whole quote. Read it again. Where's the controversy? Where's the disrespect? Where's the claim that he would easily beat Sinner or that the Italian isn't that good? But social media went absolutely nuclear. Sinner fans came out of the woodwork, accusing Federer of being arrogant, of being a bitter old man who can't handle that tennis has moved on without him, of being scared of Sinner, of disrespecting the two-time defending Australian Open champion. The comments section turned into a war zone, people saying Federer was past his prime and wouldn't stand a chance against modern players. Others claiming Sinner's game has evolved so far beyond what Federer could handle. It was chaos, complete and utter chaos, over comments that were so mild they barely registered as newsworthy. And here's what really gets me about this whole mess. Federer didn't just talk about Sinner. He heaped praise on both Sinner and Alcaraz throughout the press conference. He called their French Open final unreal. He said it was one of the greatest matches we've ever had. He talked about how the sporting world stood still watching that epic fifth set. He praised their incredible ball striking, said there's obviously more to come from both of them, expressed hope that they stay injury-free so the rivalry can continue developing. The man couldn't have been more complimentary if he'd tried. But none of that mattered to the angry mob. They latched onto the one comment about understanding how he'd play against Sinner and turned it into this whole narrative about Federer being disrespectful. It's like they didn't even listen to the rest of what he said. Or maybe they did listen, but chose to ignore it, because outrage is more fun than nuance. because getting offended on behalf of your favorite player generates more engagement than acknowledging that a retired legend was just having a normal conversation about tennis tactics. Let's break down exactly what Federer was actually saying, because apparently it needs to be explained to people who seem determined to misunderstand. He was not claiming he would beat Sinner. He was not saying Sinner is easy to figure out. He was simply doing what every former athlete does when watching their sport. He was mentally inserting himself into the competition, playing out scenarios, thinking about matchups. It's human nature. It's what makes watching sports fun for people who used to play at a high level. They can't help but analyze and strategize because that's what their brains are trained to do. And the Dimitrov reference makes perfect sense when you actually think about it instead of just reacting emotionally. Dimitrov was nicknamed Baby Fed for years, specifically because his game resembled Federer's. The one-handed backhand, the all-court style, the willingness to come forward, the variety in shot-making. When you watch Dimitrov at his best, you're essentially watching a slightly less polished version of what Federer did for 2 decades. So when Federer says, watching Dimitrov play Sinner helped him visualize how he himself would approach that matchup, he's not being arrogant. He's making a logical connection based on playing styles. And let's not forget that Dimitrov was absolutely dominating that Wimbledon match before the injury. 2 sets up, playing the best tennis of his tournament, making Sinner look uncomfortable on grass in a way we rarely see. If Dimitrov, playing Federer-style tennis, was having that much success against Sinner, then it's perfectly reasonable for Federer to think, yeah, I would have approached it similarly and maybe had success too. That's not disrespect. That's tactical analysis based on what actually happened on the court. The journalist Bastian Fachan nailed it when he questioned what all the outrage was even about. He pointed out that Federer was simply using his own perspective to contextualize Dimitrov's playing style, not claiming he would dominate Sinner or that the Italian is somehow weak. It was commentary, analysis, the kind of thing we want from retired legends who understand the game at a level most of us never will. But instead of appreciating that insight, people chose to get offended. What's really telling is how Sinner himself responded when asked about Federer's comments, because unlike his overreactive fans, Sinner actually understood what Federer was saying and didn't take offense at all. He said he would have loved to face Federer, called him the most magical tennis player of all time, and acknowledged that unfortunately he was born too late to make that dream matchup happen. Then he talked about the actual tennis, about how Dimitrov played well that day at Wimbledon and knew how to expose his weaknesses by changing pace continuously, about how he's worked in the off-season to become a more unpredictable player who can respond to that type of game. That's a mature, professional response from someone who understands what Federer was actually talking about. Sinner didn't hear disrespect. He heard tactical analysis from a legend who was complimenting him by even considering the hypothetical matchup interesting enough to discuss. If Sinner himself isn't offended, why are his fans losing their minds on his behalf? It's the same phenomenon we saw for years with Djokovic fans who would get outraged any time they perceived the slightest disrespect toward Novak, even when Djokovic himself wasn't bothered. And let's address the elephant in the room here. Some of the criticism suggested that Federer was being old and bitter about the new generation taking over tennis, that he can't handle not being the center of attention anymore, that he's jealous of Sinner and Alcaraz, which is just insane. This is Roger Federer we're talking about, 20-time Grand Slam champion, one of the most beloved athletes in the history of sports, a man who retired on his own terms, who's been nothing but gracious and supportive of the next generation, who's used his platform to lift up young players rather than tear them down. Federer has no reason to be bitter. None. He accomplished everything there is to accomplish in tennis. He's financially set for life. He's got a beautiful family. He's respected universally across the sport. The idea that he's sitting around feeling jealous of Sinner's success is so divorced from reality that it's almost funny. If anything, Federer has been one of the biggest cheerleaders for the Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry. He's publicly praised both players multiple times. He's called their matches must-see TV. He's expressed genuine excitement about where they're taking the sport. But facts don't matter when people are determined to be outraged. They see what they want to see. They interpret everything through the lens of defending their favorite player against perceived slights, even when no slight actually occurred. It's exhausting, honestly, because it means that retired legends can't even have normal conversations about tennis without worrying that some segment of fans is going to twist their words and launch a social media crusade against them. The comparison Federer made between watching Sinner Djokovic in Shanghai versus Sinner Dimitrov at Wimbledon is actually fascinating and proves he wasn't being dismissive of the Italian at all. He said that when he watched Sinner beat Djokovic in Shanghai, he didn't think about how he himself would have played, because both Sinner and Djokovic were playing styles very different from his own. He was just watching great tennis and appreciating it as a fan. But the Wimbledon match was different because of Dimitrov's similarity to his own game. That's a thoughtful distinction that shows Federer was genuinely analyzing the tennis, not just throwing shade. And here's something else that's been completely lost in all the manufactured controversy. Federer specifically said he tends to put himself in Alcaraz's mindset when watching the Spaniard play. He identified more with Carlos's style, his approach to the game. But nobody's accusing Federer of disrespecting Alcaraz by saying that. Why? Because the comment about Sinner and Dimitrov happened to be the soundbite that went viral. So that's what people latched onto. If it had been the Alcaraz comment that spread across social media, we'd probably be seeing Spanish fans getting mad instead of Italian fans. The whole episode highlights a broader problem with how fans engage with their favorite athletes in the social media age. There's this tribalism, this need to defend your player against any perceived slight, no matter how small or non-existent. It's not enough to just enjoy watching Sinner play incredible tennis and win titles. His fans apparently also need to patrol the internet, looking for opportunities to attack anyone who doesn't show what they consider sufficient reverence, even when that someone is Roger freaking Federer, who has more credibility talking about tennis than maybe anyone alive. What makes this even more frustrating is that Federer's analysis was actually interesting and valuable if you bothered to listen to it with an open mind. He was offering insight into how different playing styles match up against each other, how grass court tennis requires different tactics than hard courts, how variety and pace changes can be effective weapons against baseline grinders. This is the kind of stuff tennis nerds should be eating up, not getting angry about. But we can't have nice things anymore because everything has to be filtered through the lens of fan warfare. The fact that Federer felt the need to clarify that he wasn't trying to praise the players too much, that he said it with a smile but also with an edge, shows he understands the tightrope he's walking. He can't be too effusive in his praise, or it seems fake. But he can't offer any critique or analysis without someone getting offended. It's an impossible position for retired athletes who just want to talk about the sport they devoted their lives to. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of legends eventually just stop doing media appearances. Why bother when anything you say can and will be twisted into controversy? I keep coming back to Sinner's response because it really is the perfect example of how this situation should have been handled. He took Federer's comments as the tactical analysis they were meant to be. He didn't get defensive. He didn't claim Federer was wrong. He acknowledged that Dimitrov found a way to trouble him at Wimbledon and talked about working on those areas in his game. That's what champions do. They take feedback, even implicit feedback, and use it to improve. They don't need their fans to fight imaginary battles on their behalf. And let's be real for a second about the hypothetical matchup itself. Would prime Federer have had success against current Sinner? Maybe. Maybe not. It depends on the surface, the conditions, who's playing better that day, a million different variables. But it's worth discussing because both players are all-time greats. Federer, in his prime, was one of the most devastating players who ever lived. Sinner right now is on an incredible run and playing at an elite level. The tennis between them would have been fascinating to watch. That's the conversation we should be having, not whether Federer was being disrespectful by daring to suggest he would have had a game plan. The evolution of the game argument that some fans made is particularly weak. Yes, tennis has evolved. Players are fitter, stronger, faster than they were 20 years ago. But acting like Federer in his prime couldn't compete with today's players is absurd. The man won Grand Slams across 3 different decades. He adapted his game multiple times throughout his career to stay competitive. He was beating prime Djokovic and Nadal well into his 30s. The idea that he'd be helpless against Sinner doesn't hold up to even the slightest scrutiny. What this whole backlash really reveals is how fragile some fans are about their favorite players. They can't just enjoy Sinner being a 2-time defending Australian Open champion going for a historic three-peat. They can't just appreciate that he's playing incredible tennis and deserves all the accolades he's getting. They need him to be beyond reproach, immune to any suggestion that anyone could have challenged him. That's not confidence in your player. That's insecurity masquerading as loyalty. And poor Federer is just trying to do his job as a tennis ambassador. He shows up to the Australian Open to participate in a celebration of the sport. He's asked questions about the current stars. He gives thoughtful, detailed answers that show he's actually watching and analyzing their games. And for his trouble, he gets attacked on social media by people who didn't even understand what he was saying. It's enough to make you wonder why any retired legend would bother engaging with the media at all. The timing of this whole controversy is particularly unfortunate because it's overshadowing what should be a celebration of Sinner's achievements. The guy just fought through a doping scandal that wasn't his fault, served his suspension, and came back to compete at the highest level. He's chasing history in Melbourne. He's one of the best players in the world. That's the story. That's what we should be talking about. Instead, we're having this stupid debate about whether Federer disrespected him, which he didn't because fans couldn't help themselves. I genuinely feel bad for Sinner in all of this because he handled it perfectly, and his fans are still out there making him look bad by proxy. When your supporters are attacking Roger Federer, one of the most universally respected figures in tennis, for making mild tactical observations, it doesn't reflect well on the fan base, and by extension, it doesn't reflect well on the player, even though he had nothing to do with it. Sinner seems like a good guy who just wants to play tennis and win titles. He doesn't need this circus. Looking ahead, I hope this whole incident serves as a wake-up call for how we discuss tennis, and how fans engage with retired players who offer commentary. Federer wasn't being disrespectful. He wasn't being arrogant. He wasn't diminishing Sinner's accomplishments. He was doing exactly what we should want retired legends to do, offering informed analysis based on decades of experience playing the game at the highest level. If we can't handle that without launching crusades on social media, then we don't deserve to have players like Federer sharing their insights with us. The backlash against Roger Federer over his Sinner comments was misguided, unfair, and based on a complete misreading of what he actually said. He praised both Sinner and Alcaraz throughout the press conference. He called their matches incredible. He expressed excitement about their rivalry. The one comment about understanding how he'd approach playing Sinner was tactical analysis, not disrespect. And Sinner himself understood that, even if his fans didn't. So maybe, just maybe, we can all take a breath and remember that discussing hypothetical matchups and tactical approaches is part of what makes tennis fun. It's not an insult to suggest that prime Federer would have had ideas about how to play against current Sinner. It's a compliment to both players that the matchup would have been interesting enough to analyze. And if we can't have those conversations without people losing their minds and attacking legends, then we've lost something important about what makes sports discourse worthwhile. Roger Federer has earned the right to share his thoughts on tennis without being attacked for it. Jannik Sinner has earned the respect of being analyzed and discussed as one of the best players in the world, and fans need to earn the maturity to handle both of those things without turning everything into a controversy. The Australian Open is about to get underway. Let's focus on the actual tennis being played instead of manufacturing drama that doesn't need to exist. Because at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason. We love this sport. And tearing down legends doesn't make our favorite current players any better. It just makes us all look foolish.